Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, and having had the chance to work in the capacity of a counselor and a therapist, and thereby having had the chance and the privilege to integrate and to bring together different perspectives from all these various dimensions to some degree helps me understand or helps me correlate and connect the aspects of our psyche through the amalgamation of these various lenses. And thereby, in keeping with that, today I'd like to talk about the catch 22 situation. The aspects of our lives that kind of seem paradoxical, that to some degree may also be paradoxical, that brings us to a choice point wherein we are a little confused or maybe even a lot confused with regards to what choices to make. So let's look at some of the aspects which land us up into catch 22 situation. Let's begin from the very beginning. So if we decide to bring a new life into this world, which is where our journey or our new journey as a parent begins, and the new journey of a new life also begins, as much as it might seem like a very joyous moment, which it is, a very happy moment, which it is, a very exciting moment, which it is, a very dream filling, an aspiration fulfilled moment, not just for one single individual, but maybe a whole lot of people. The packaging of that deal, of bringing a new life into this world, of becoming a parent, of becoming a caretaker, of becoming a caregiver, of becoming the provider and the nurturer, of becoming the safety ground, also comes with a lot of pain. Does also involve sleepless nights or sleep deprived nights, which can stretch from a few days to a few months to even a few years. It involves taking care of this little person's sickness and health, which it in itself cannot take care of. It would involve cleaning all of their messy businesses. It might also come with postpartum depression, which of course then needs to be attended to if it is recognized, if it gets diagnosed, if one is able to find the right support system to help this person go through all of that, which is why they also say it takes an entire village, not just a family, not just a community, but an entire village to raise one single child, which invariably tells us that a little kid is a lot of work by a lot of people in a healthy, interactive, supportive, attuned, attentive way, which can then bring the next generation forward, which is then helping raise the next generation in the most healthy, most attuned, most attended to, and in the most nurturing and safe, supportive environment. Let's think of another example, love, which we all desire, which we all aspire for. So many a times we would notice that the people we love the most are also the ones that at times hurt us the most, shame and blame us the most. Because from their lenses, from that aspect, the idea goes, or the thought processes are, or the mindset is, that I'm a little hard on you or more hard on you compared to others. Because in my opinion, you are the only one that can live up or deliver those expectations, that is capable of delivering those expectations. And if you're not able to do that, then I need to be a little hard on you, which is their way of understanding love, which is their way of demonstrating love. On the other hand, it also weirdly happens that in order to gain somebody's affection and attention and love, or at least which we seem to call as love, some people can start acting indifferently towards us, in the hope that the other person, being triggered by this kind of an indifference, will start chasing us, which is happening in their subconscious. Now, once this other person starts to chase me or chase us, there's a part of us that gets that dopamine spike. There's a part of us that feels more valuable if we are being chased. There's a part of us that feels more worthwhile if we are chased. And unfortunately, many a times we would keep repeating these patterns for a majority of our lifetime if we do not consciously become aware that it's a pattern, that it was formed somewhere in the earliest years of our lives, wherein we learned to equate love one way or the other. And yet, love requires us to be open, to be vulnerable. And both of those aspects can also come with the fear of rejection, which can cause interpersonal or social anxiety, which is where we start to shut ourselves, which is where we start to defend ourselves. And the more we try to defend ourselves, the more it collaborates with the idea that all is fair in love and war, which is where love and war almost becomes the same thing. So we want love, but we don't wish to be open and vulnerable. We want to be connected, but without vulnerability, without that openness or the courage to be that open, to be able to express our whole self completely, it's quite difficult to form meaningful and real and genuine relationships. It's quite difficult to experience love if that kind of a trust is missing, where we can't be vulnerable and we can't be open. Because love doesn't happen in defensive stances, which again, in my understanding, requires a beautiful balance, a beautiful integration of both of these contradictory, contrasting aspects. Yet another example of the catch-22 situation is the choice of marriage, is the institution of marriage. Wherein there's a beautiful quote in Hindi which goes something like this: ये वो लड्डू है जो खाए वो पछताए, जो ना खाए वो भी पछताए. Invariably translating to some degree as whether you choose to get married or whether you choose not to do so, you will repent and regret either which ways. So what do you do then? Well, that's the catch. What do we do? Another example, in keeping with the catch-22 situation, is in keeping with the professional side of the world, wherein the real world requires us to have some kind of an experience, i.e., a past memory or accumulation of past experiences of history with regards to our job description, with regards to our job profiles, with regards to where all we have worked, with regards to the capacities in which we have worked, with regards to the kind of challenges we have faced, and the accomplishments we have derived or achieved after having overcome those challenges. And yet, on the other hand, there is a part of the population that is unable to cite any experience because either they are freshers or they've not been able to get a job anywhere. And in a way, then they are saying, I don't have a past memory, I don't have achievements or laurels in the past, resting in the past that I can talk about today. And thereby, they remain unemployed, which again is a catch-22 situation. Now, in my understanding, as of today, I see a few reasons as to why this catch-22 situation presents or exists within the human species. Firstly, the catch-22 situation quite clearly tells us that it's the paradox of choices that we experience as human beings. For there is no other species on the planet as of today that experiences the paradox of choices, or at least the large variety of paradox of choices. The more choices we have, the more confused many of us seem to feel, many of us seem to be, and thereby invariably a lot more dissatisfied as well. So we bicker and crib when we have no choices, for in a way we feel helpless, and we also seem to feel that we have no agency or no autonomy. And yet, on the other hand, when we have far too many choices, it seems to make us feel overwhelmed. A few other examples that I can think of with regards to the catch-22 situation is wanting to be famous, is driven by being known. And as much as we like to be outstanding, there's a bigger part of us that equally wants to feel belonged, that equally wants to feel accepted, that equally wants to feel included and inclusive within our social structure, within our social format. And the desire to be famous or to be known within the catch-22 situation also then comes with the reality check, with the understanding, not everybody will like us. We might get a lot of people, or at least a few people, who would dislike us. Some would even hate us. Some might be disgusted by us. And some would be indifferent towards us. So the desire for fame also comes with the understanding, quote unquote, which I'd like to state with a song over here, जो है नाम वाला वही तो बदनाम है. The one who's well known or the one who's famous was very likely most criticized, most hated, most disrespected and disliked as well. Two other examples with regards to the catch-22 situation, with the paradox of choices situation, can also be understood through the usage or the misusage of social media and AI. Now, the usage of that as a tool, and to be very aware and be mindful that we are not overusing it, overconsuming it, and thereby abusing it, making it addictive, is something that requires conscious attention, is something that requires conscious attunement, conscious awareness, conscious presence. It only becomes a habit, it only gets overused and overconsumed and addictive when we are not engaged and present with ourselves. That is when we seem to assume that it gives us more meaning and more engagement, when engagement with our own selves and with our inner circle is missing. With regards to the AI, if we are able to use it appropriately to enhance our productivity, while we intentionally and internally get into more mindful spaces, into more meditative spaces, and if I'm using the word meditative here, which in the native language translates into dhyan, into attention, into focus, and thereby naturally being attuned, along with using it in a way wherein it is automating most of our productive work, while we begin to enhance our calmness, while we begin to enhance our own capacity to self-reflect, to self-engage, very mindfully with ourselves and with others. In my understanding, it'll be an amazing tool to use. But on the other hand, given the catch-22 situation that we almost face all the time in the course of our existence, in the course of our experiential existence, if we get mindless about it and it starts to run our lives, it starts to make decisions for our lives, it starts to tell us what's healthy and not healthy for us, it'll quite likely, very quickly, start to replace human connections, human to human connections, to quite a large degree. And that, in my understanding, would be a time wherein we are engaging not with another human, but a machine that knows how to mimic empathy, that knows exactly what to say because of what you want to hear. We just might be creating human behaviors that are more entitled, which can then lead to behavioral issues, a lot more loneliness, anxiety disorders, and personality disorders as well. And in the longer run, we might just be creating very dangerous species, or at least species that are more harmful than helpful. So, if we can go back to the time when we were little kids and when we were listening or learning the stories of the ants and the grasshopper and of the hare and the tortoise or the rabbit and the tortoise, if we objectively look at the stories, we would invariably find two very contrasting species that are placed within the same storyline, within the same narration, wherein two contrasting species and thereby two different worlds are being placed and being compared within the same narrative, wherein the tortoise is a solitary creature, is not a mammal, is not a warm blooded species, is a very slow moving creature and will not care for its young ones as soon as it's hatched the eggs, hatched them. While as on the other hand, is this rabbit, is this hare that is extremely fast moving, that can leave its competitor tortoise far behind in the race, that can even take out the time to rest while the tortoise is trying to catch up, is a mammal and thereby, at least to some degree, has the capacity to care for its young ones, is not cold blooded, unlike the reptile. Whether viewed through the story of the ants and the grasshopper, where one species lives in a community within a social setting and the other is a solitary creature, needing no community, needing no social support, needing no collaborative efforts. In a way tells us that human, in a way, is the only species present on the planet today that is an amalgamation of both of these contrasting worlds, is an amalgamation of both of the paradoxes that we get to experience within us, which is why the grasshopper doesn't have the choice to live like an ant in a social community, in a collaborative manner, to even look out for social supports, to even be able to ask for any kind of a help if it needs at any point in time. And the ants have not been given the choice to live like a solitary creature, to only care for its own self without even thinking about anybody else. The hare or the rabbit has not been given the choice to live like a tortoise, to live like a cold blooded reptile, solitary and alone, and not wanting the company of others, and not even caring for others, even for its own kids. And the tortoise has not been given the chance and the choice and the opportunity to experience the life of a rabbit. It is only the human beings that gets to experience both of these two different worlds that to some degree seem contradictory, and to have an amalgamation of both of those worlds, to be able to then choose bits and pieces or chunks of it from these two worlds, from the experiences of both of these worlds, which in my understanding makes us a lot more freer compared to any other species that really never has a choice and thereby can't even take the responsibility for the choices it never has. While as the human, from the basic standpoint of evolution, has been given the paradoxical choices of choosing from these two worlds and then be equally responsible for those choices. Which is why, in the human realm, in the human world, freedom then also comes with the highest responsibilities possible, which in itself can seem like a catch 22 situation, wherein freedom only happens through choices, and choices demand responsibility, which is why freedom equals responsibility. And not using that freedom wisely or intelligently, in my understanding, is not just unintelligent, but it's abuse as well. Secondly, since a large chunk of us, since a large chunk of our decisions and our choices are laid by our experiences, which forms our subconscious and our unconscious, even begs us to reflect that many a times we wish to do something, we aspire to do something, and yet we sabotage them, yet we do not take decisions or steps towards amalgamating them in our lives. For as the quote goes, that the known devil is better than the unknown angel. Quite naturally, it would also then be difficult to trust the angel within us, which is where many a times we are far more afraid of walking into the unknown. We are far more afraid of the unknown than of the known, even when it's painful, even when it's miserable. For the subconscious, no matter what, would always rely on the past experiences, the past history, the past stories. But till it decides to learn from it, until it decides to repair it and to rebuild it, which both requires a lot of effort, it will keep repeating its own stories, its own past experiences over and over and over again. Which is why many a times we even ask people for their past experiences, whether in our personal lives or in our professional lives. And in keeping with the catch 22 situation, there's also an aspect of us, a part of our brain, or at least a large part of our brain, that is averse to loss, which is called as loss aversion. And through the course of its evolution, when it was evolving through the jungles, through the wild, quite naturally, most of the times, losing any kind of resource, whether it was a human, whether it was land, food, or water, quite literally meant death. And to that unconscious part of us, any kind of a loss, unknowingly, because it's unconscious, quite literally registers as a huge catastrophe or death, which is where, even if we are in unhealthy places, even if we are in unhealthy spaces, even when we wish to make a different choice and we don't, that part of us is getting triggered, that part of us is getting reminded of death. For every choice that we make will demand, will require some kind of a loss. And it is this loss aversion that our brain and our nervous system evolved with, that it's trying to prevent and protect, which is where the catch 22 situation comes all over again. And in order to address the catch 22 situation, I'm reminded of the story of King Midas, wherein this particular king was given the blessing by the god that whatever he touched will turn into gold. And he got so exuberant and so happy and so excited that he started touching everything in his palace. To have touched his daughter accidentally, who then also turned into gold, who then also turned into a lifeless statue, which is where he breaks down and he asks for this blessing to be taken away. And in a way, this story tells us that a blessing can also turn into a curse if we are not mindful, if we are not conscious, if we are not aware of the choices that we are making. If we go about making those choices on the autopilot. And maybe over here, if I could edit this story, and if I would have gotten this kind of a blessing, I would have also probably added that give me the wisdom, provide me the wisdom at every instance to understand, to realize what to touch and what not to touch, how much to touch and how much to not touch. And just as an example, maybe if I had that blessing, I would have said that let the frame of my glasses turn into gold without touching the lenses, for the lenses bring about some clarity with regards to seeing things. And that is where mindfulness, that is where awareness, that is where conscious thinking, that is where conscious decision making comes into the picture, which helps us be a little discerning towards the choices that we make, towards the decisions that we take. Let's try and reflect on all of those aspects. Let's try and even see the beauty in the catch 22 situation. And let's try and use it to our advantage, which no other species has been given the choice for, has been given the choice towards. Let's do that for ourselves, and I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.